What can you say about Richard Garriott? Outsized dreams and outsized ambitions, they require outsized personalities, and this is one of the real larger-than-life personalities in the technology and the game field. You know, you have big figures like Steve Jobs, like Bill Gates. Well, Richard Garriott is another one of those. This is a guy who arguably created the first computer role-playing game. It's a guy who went to space. This is a guy who built his own dream castles with hidden rooms and turned it into haunted mansions for Halloween every year. This is a guy who chased a burglar out of his house with an Uzi only because he couldn't get to all the various broadswords and battle axes on his walls in time.
He's basically the reason that I started playing video games. I didn't know it until maybe I was 14 and I really started playing Final Fantasy VII and decided that, yeah, RPGs are the way of life. When I was old enough to really appreciate it, I started looking into Ultima, and the games just espouse so many of the themes that current and modern RPGs are still espousing now, just fighting against injustice and racism and xenophobia, and just trying to be a decent human being, even if you've gotten amnesia, even if you've lost a father or a loved one, or some cliched RPG plot. They all came from there, but there's nothing like the original.
Richard Garriott's one of video games' biggest renaissance men. He's been a game developer for decades. He's been an author, a filmmaker, an astronaut, all things that a lot of other people aspire to be individually, and he has, over the course of his life, been all of those things.
The Richard Garriott story is probably one that would make the ultimate video game movie. So here's a kid who loves Dungeons and Dragons and then goes on to create his first video game for $200. That brings in $150,000, and he hasn't even touched Ultima at that point. His games have changed not only the video game industry, but the way we evolve as gamers. So years ago, I worked at Sony when we were making EverQuest, and arguably there would be no EverQuest or World of Warcraft without Ultima Online, which was probably the first MMO. When Ultima was at its peak, you would have game developers going from studio to studio with a pitch line that would be something like, it's Ultima on steroids, or it's Ultima blah, blah, blah. That's how popular Ultima was during the time. And if you ask any game maker today, they'll all say they were influenced by Ultima in some way.
My introduction to the Ultima series began with Ultima 6, which, strange to think that came out more than a quarter century ago. I still remember unboxing it and pulling out a gigantic cloth map and just marveling over that. And it was one of the first things that I guess made me think about packaging and production values with regard to video games. The other major thing I remember about it was that the NPCs adhered to a day-night cycle, so that people would go to work and then they would go to a pub and then they would go to sleep, and that was just mind-blowing for me at the time. It really furthered the illusion that the world was going on without my input. Of course, we in video games are used to concepts now like emergent gameplay. We're used to the idea of many systems going on at once, but I remember this was really the first game that brought home to me the idea of NPCs sort of adhering to their own schedule, and that just furthered the fantasy.
Playing Ultima as a kid, I might not have played it on PC like most people. I played the NES versions, which probably weren't the best way to play the game, but having that as part of the RPG library that the NES has, alongside the original Final Fantasies, the original Dragon Quest games, it's easy to see the different influences that the Ultima series brought to the table, where those were fantasy games as well, but there was all these other elements that came as part of an Ultima game that you can see and feel that the Japanese developed games might not have really instilled in their players.
As a pioneer in video games, the first game Richard Garriott made was kind of a family affair. And he made copies of it. He stuck it in Ziploc bags. I mean, that is the coolest thing about video game history, is that it just started in a house. It started in a room, and it just blossomed and grew because it was the right time. And Richard Garriott, among a handful of other people, was there, and he made it work because he was smart and assertive. And that's kind of what we love about our video game developers. They have something to say, they say it, and they do it. And that's what Richard Garriott's about.
So, Lord British, this is to you. Thank you for your contributions. You helped me become the gamer I am today.